Today we're talking about what would happen if you remembered all your past lives. It's going to be good. But before we start, I want to say a big shout out to everyone that attended our charity stream for the National Network of Abortion Funds on a few days ago on Monday. We raised over $42,000, which was absolutely fantastic. It's been a really crazy time with all the ridiculous rulings going on. All the insanity due to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So big shout out to everyone who attended. If you haven't seen that, the charity stream, the replay of it's still up. Go watch it. It's awesome. I'm still very upset that more people are not angry about this. I mean, people are angry about this, but it should be a lot more. So people ask me all the time if reincarnation is true. And just an FYI, in Hyperianism, we like to use relocalization and localization rather than incarnation and reincarnation to kind of remove the mystical mumbo jumbo that often surrounds it. But anyways, a lot of people ask me, hey, if reincarnation or relocalization is true, why don't I remember my past lives? Why don't we remember our past lives? And so the answer to this is, well, have you ever thought what would happen if you did remember all your past lives? What would happen if you remembered all your past lives? And to answer this question, before we jump into what would happen if you remembered all your past lives, let's just think about this life. Let's first think about what would happen if you remembered every moment of this life. Because do you remember every moment of this life? Of course not. You don't remember what you were doing, 262 days ago at 8 p.m. You probably don't even remember what day it is, let alone what you were doing, as far as in what day of the week it lands. So what does stick out to you are moments that have impacted you, such as, when you got your first car, your first kiss, or when you graduated. All these things are impactful, and so they sort of burn themselves in your memory. They're more apparent. But what would happen if you remembered every single moment? And then we're going to see how that translates over to your past lives. So to start off, I want to take a look at this article from mindmatters.ai, where they talk about some people who do have the ability to remember anything that they'd like. So it says, ever wish you had total recall? Ask people who do. It says, recall of every detail of one's past works out better for some people than for others. So I don't know how to say their name. I'm going to assume it's Mary Lou. Mary Lou Henner, who played Elaine Nardo in the sitcom Taxi, has total recall. She can recall off the top of her head the exact day that she got the part. It was June 4th of 1978. It was a Sunday, and I found out at the Grease premiere party, Henner said. Taxi is so vivid in my mind. The very first rehearsal was July the 5th of 1978. That was a Wednesday, and our first show was shot the 14th, a Friday. The actress, who also starred in LA Story and Man on the Moon, is one of the 12 people in the world diagnosed with hyperthymesia, also known as highly superior autobiographical memory. Very interesting. Only 12 people in the world. So in a 60 Minutes Australia program, Henner demonstrates the ability and explains what it feels like. We're going to see how this ties into past lives. It's very important to really reflect and understand what it would be like to remember every moment. So Henner also wrote a book called Total Memory Makeover on managing memories to one's advantage. She has written a number of other health and relationship books as well. Henner knows the month, day, and year of every event that has happened in her lifetime, from major news events to minor personal incidents, like the fact that she broke her wrist in a revolving door on Sunday, May 6th, 1973. If you tell her your birth date, she'll tell you the day of the week you were born. It's just something I've been able to do my whole life. It's just there, says Henner, who became aware of her ability at age 6. It's like a DVD menu or a hard drive. Everything is there. So what about the neuroscience behind it? MRI tests indicate that the temporal lobes in the subject's brain are significantly larger than those of people who do not have this ability. But the cause remains unknown. Is the region larger because they were born with it and it plays some role in their memory, or is it because they've exercised their memory causing this region of the brain to grow larger? We don't have an answer to that question. We don't know whether the subjects were born this way or it's an ability acquired on. So it continues here, saying that Henner makes good use of her skill. But the important thing that I want to give across here is that so Henner has this ability and has used it in a way that has been helpful. But now we're going to take a look at a different case. And this is something that's really important to emphasize here. It says some total recallers have not found living with their skill so easy. So it seems like there's a difference. So the 60-minute Australia program also features Jill Price, who was born in 1965 in New York City, who describes a much less dynamic and encouraging life. Price was the first person ever to be diagnosed with what is now known as highly superior autobiographic memory, or HSAM, a condition she shares with around 60 other known people. Now, it's interesting that now this says 60. I just want to go up because the other said 12. What's the difference here? Highly superior autobiographic identity. And this was written 7 years later. So, wait, was it? Yeah, so the one that says one of 60 was written 7 years later than the quote that said one of 12. So perhaps they found more people. Seems to be the case. I lost my place. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this one was written in 2017, so 5 years later. So perhaps they found more people. So she has this highly superior autobiographical memory. It is, she says, like living with a split screen. On the left side is the present, and on the right is a constantly rolling reel of memories, each one sparked by the appearance of present-day stimuli. So I wonder if, because you can see the difference here. You have Henner, and then you have Price. So Henner seems like she has the skill and she's been able to use it to her advantage. It seems like Price's, though, is a lot more uncontrollable. It looks like Henner, you tell them a day or a time or something, and they can tell you something about it, it seems like. Whereas Price, it seems for them that it's happening continuously all the time. Price describes it like living with a split screen. On the left side is the present, and on the right side is a constantly rolling reel of memories, each one sparked by the appearance of present-day stimuli. With so many memories always at the ready, Price says, it can be maddening. Virtually anything she sees or hears can be a potential trigger. Now, this sounds a lot more realistic to me, and I would assume from what it sounds like that Henner and Price probably are in the same umbrella of the same sort of condition. But it seems like Price, it's a lot more prevalent, something that's happening constantly, that can't be shut off, that has this maddening experience. As she describes it, whenever I see a date flash on the television, or anywhere else for that matter, I automatically go back to that day and remember where I was, what I was doing, what day it fell on, and on, and on, and on. And even the description seems a bit different. When Henner, they're talking about Henner, they're talking more about, when she got her movie, when she was rehearsing for the movie, or when she broke her wrist. Much more dramatic experiences. Now, I'm not saying that's all she remembers, but those are the ones that were highlighted. Whereas when we're talking about Price here, it seems to be just absolutely everything, just a constant stream of even mundane memories. If she sees a date, she goes back to that day and remember where I was, what I was doing, what it fell on, and on and on and on and on. It's a nonstop, uncontrollable, and totally exhausting. Most have called it a gift, but I call it a burden. I run my entire life through my head every day, and it drives me crazy. So it seems like Henner, the one who uses it to their advantage, is a lot more limited to some extent. Whereas Price seems that it's just this total constant stream that's always there, that can't be turned off. And so what this has to do, and we have more to read here, but with past life memories, is that people say, well, why don't I remember my past lives? Can you imagine how absolutely maddening that would be if you did remember your past lives? See, even if you remembered every single moment of this life, it would be exhausting and maddening. And that's just a single life. You have had countless lifetimes, lifetime after lifetime. It's not like you've had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 100. You've had many, 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 many lifetimes. And if you remembered those lifetimes, you would be driven insane. And so what happens in Hyperionism supports brain filter theory. What brain filter theory means is that the brain reduces the capabilities of the mind so that one can experience reality in a coherent way that has been adapted to survive. So again, if you imagine, we go back into the early stages of evolution, and you have one creature that is just totally inundated with all these memories, and it's constantly reflecting, and then another predator that is just focused on what's happening around it right then, they're going to be able to eat and kill that other distracted animal. And so via natural selection and also dialectical evolution, the brain will be evolve towards selecting that which is useful for survival. And so the brain has evolved because of a survival and adaptation mechanism to filter out that which is not relevant to your survival here on this particular planet, in this particular place, in this particular life. Because the whole point is to generate an avatar that will be able to survive and ultimately develop self-consciousness and self-awareness. And so we, up until this point where humanity has reached self-awareness relatively early, not that far past in history compared to the history of the entire planet, it was not that long ago that humanity developed self-awareness. And so humanity has developed self-awareness and in an avatar that is built to just survive, not to reveal truth, not to tell you what reality is, but to be effective at adapting and surviving. And being inundated with all this information would drive you mad and drive you insane. And this is why anyone that was able to do this, or not any person, but just any creature, would have died out, would have gone extinct because they would not have been adapted. And also think about what a disadvantage it would be for you to have memories not associated with your avatar. And what I mean by that is, let's say you had incarnations as a spider. Remembering how to spin a web is going to do no good to you right now as a human being. So it would be ridiculous to have all these past memories gained by being a spider or a giraffe or a tiger or all these different things that have absolutely no relevance to you right now as a human being. Therefore, the brain would develop in such a way that limits you to your current experiences and what is useful for you right now. So a lot of people wonder why they don't remember past lives. It was because if you did remember past lives, you would be driven insane. It would be a curse. You would hate it. You wouldn't want that. And the fact that the brain limits and filters your mind is precisely what allows you to have this stable experience where you aren't driven mad by all the different... Just imagine the trauma as well. Imagine, there are certain things in your life that have caused you trauma. Imagine all, like the traumas and heartbreaks too, even if you just talked about human incarnations that would just be burdening you constantly. You would be an absolute wreck. You would be hardly able to function at all whatsoever. So it's a very good thing that the brain has developed as a mechanism to filter and limit one's memories. Now, what will be very interesting is in the future, if we can develop either augmentations for the brain or an entirely new avatar to be able to select for some different information. So it would be advantageous if perhaps it were something that we could consciously select for and filter out certain data. Like maybe what I mean by that is if we develop augmentations for the brain to lift that filter or an entirely new avatar altogether, we could perhaps figure out ways to tune in to specific, let's say, memory coordinates to get specific memories from targeted specific lives or things of that nature, so that it's not just this constant flood of information, but that we could sort of perhaps bring things up at will, sort of like we can do a Google search or bring up certain web pages at will, rather than just can you imagine the difference, right? So that's the difference. It was like using Google to search for certain things, information that you want, rather than having the entire internet flood you at one time. If the entire internet was constantly flooding you, you'd go crazy. But if you were able to select for certain pieces of data, then that would be advantageous. And so that's what it's up to us right now. We have, these bodies have evolved over billions of years, through different animals, different incarnations, different creatures, all this. We've, been going through evolution. And we've reached the point where we have gained self-awareness, and humans have become self-aware in these, meat suits, avatars that have been evolved for survival and adaptability, not for, gaining knowledge necessarily. Knowledge that doesn't contribute to survival or adaptation is not something that evolution is concerned about. With regard to the physical avatar, that is. But now that we have reached self-awareness, humanity now must step into the phase that's beyond self-awareness, which we talk a lot about in Hyperianism, which is hyper-awareness. And so once humanity starts to become hyper-aware, what that means is that, there is a lot to what that means. But we start to become aware of what we are, where we are, and why we are here. And then we can begin to modify and adapt ourselves to go beyond what just unconscious evolution has provided us with, and take control of our own evolution. We can realize that we are the conscious aspect of evolution. That's what we are. We are, when we realize it, are the conscious aspect of evolution. And we know that it is true. We know that that is what we are. We are no longer being guided by unconscious evolution. That's extremely slow. That's a snail's pace compared to conscious evolution, when we realize that we are the force of the universe. And thus, what is our task is to, among many, many other things, but to update our avatars so that it's no longer just a vehicle for survival, but a vehicle that is now being modified and adapted to as tools for gaining knowledge. And thus we may want to bypass that brain filter. You see, the brain filter served as a very, very useful tool for escaping predators and, watching out for lions and tigers and all this sort of thing. But now that that's, much less of a concern, and we realize what we are, we realize where we are, we realize why we're here, we can begin updating and adapting these avatars to be able to lift that filter, to select for information that will be helpful for our survival. Not survival, for our growth. Not survival. We're done with survival. Well, we should be done with survival, but the world hasn't realized that yet because it's not yet hyper-aware. Humanity is still stuck in the age of self-awareness and survival. So we need to step away from self-awareness and survival and into hyper-awareness and growth. The world is in a sorry state because it doesn't understand that it has to leave behind its old, outdated evolutionary mechanism of dividing into separate groups and fighting for survival and protection. No, it's time for now to leave behind survival and step into a time of growth. And that entails realizing what we are, where we are, why we're here, stepping into this new consciousness, having a global, united planetary civilization rather than a fractured world where everyone's about my nature, my God, my flag, and not my nature, my nation, my God, my flag, versus the other, the alien, the foreigner, the outsider. All that has to be, all that has to be done away with. This time of infighting, tooth and nail for survival it should be done. It should be over with. We need to step into this new phase now. And so once humanity understands that and gets on board, we can really turn to focusing on altering our avatars, altering our, neurochemistry, all these sorts of things to be able to lift that filter more and more, but in a guided way. Because if you were to remember all your lives right now instantly, you would be like I said, you would go mad. You'd be flooded with information. And not only can we adapt our brains and adapt our avatars, or even create entirely new avatars, technological avatars or virtual avatars with different filtering mechanisms, we can also develop the ability to tune into different frequency domains. Like right now, we're tuned in the collective frequency domain of the space-time world. And when you go to sleep and dream at night, you're tuned into your own personal frequency domain. But once we start to develop and understand what we are, develop new technologies, develop new avatars, develop augmentations, we can develop this ability to tune into different frequency domains and then ultimately construct our own collective frequency domain and transcend the need for the collective physical reality at all, which would be the stage after planetary civilization, which is planetary independence. So you have these stages. You have the stage of survival, the stage of planetary civilization, and then the stage of planetary independence. Right now, humanity is still stuck in the stage of survival. It needs to be done away with. We need to be done away with survival and self-awareness and switch over to where we build a planetary civilization under hyper-awareness. That's where we need to go to. That's where we need to be. And then once we are there, the next phase will be to reach planetary independence, where we don't even rely on a planet anymore. We have no more need for it because we have created a self-sustaining collective and create its own collective frequency domain. But I digress. Continuing here, we have Price, who is just struggling with this totally exhausting condition where they remember absolutely everything. And it says, not much research has been done on this remarkable topic, but University of California neurobiologist James McGaugh says that whose specialty is memory, reported on Price's ability in 2006. So this report describes AJ, a woman. So I think they're using AJ as sort of a way to refer to Price. Perhaps she wanted to be anonymous at the time because this was written a long time ago. Not a long time ago, but 2006. Anyway, I think that AJ is referring to Price, but I'm not sure because it says right here that this is a report from a neuroscientist or a neurobiologist on Price's ability. So I don't know if it's on Price specifically or Price's ability, but anyway, regardless, this report describes AJ, a woman whose remembering dominates her life. Her memory is nonstop, uncontrollable, and automatic. And you see, that's what happens when the filter is totally lifted. If it's controllable in some way, then the filter is working in some capacity. It's not, if there's no filter, it's just all flooding in. So that's why it seems like, who was the first person, Mary Lou Henner? She seems like she has some form of filter because it seems like it's not uncontrollable, that she can specifically go to things when she wants, that it's not just this constant stream. For Price, it just seems like this completely unfiltered, all the time, constant stream. So this report describes AJ, a woman whose remembering dominates her life. Her memory is nonstop, uncontrollable, and automatic. AJ spends an excessive amount of time recalling her personal past with considerable accuracy and reliability. If given a date, she can tell you what she was doing and what the day of the week it fell on. She differs from other cases of superior memory who use practice mnemonics to remember vast amounts of personally irrelevant information. So mnemonics is a skill that one can use, which usually has to do with association to be able to have a really good memory. But this is a learned skill that one uses sort of like this mental trick of mnemonics. And I'll give you an example of a mnemonic that one can do. So so let's say that you want to remember a list of one. So this is kind of a trick you can do with your friends. I mean, it's hard. It takes a little while to practice this, so I'm not going to give you all. I'll just give you a summary of how it works. Right. So let's say that you want to show your friends that you have this awesome memory, and you're going to tell them that, hey, I'm going to take a list of 30 different things, and you just basically like, I'm going to say number 1, and you name anything. Could be like a basketball or like just name anything, any object or whatever. And so they name different things. Like for number 1, we'll put basketball. For number 2, we'll put toilet paper. For number 3, we'll put birthday cake. For number 4, we'll put police car or whatever. And you do this all the way until 30. And so that's a really long list for most people, right? If you give them, you say, okay, well, you take the list, take it away, and then you say, name any number. And they say, okay, number 27. And then you can tell them what word they said was 27. Name another one, 16, and you can tell them instantly what it was. And so whatever number that they name, you can tell them what word is associated with it instantly. And so this works via mnemonic. And basically how this works is you memorize a word yourself that rhymes with the number. So, for example, for 1, gun, 2, shoe, 3, flea, 4, pour, 5, hive, 6, trick, 7, heaven, 8, gate, 9, pine, 10, hen, something like this. And you do that all the way to 30. And you memorize this. You make this vivid in your memory. And so what happens is when someone says, okay, number 1, right? Okay, we're going to make, name something for number 1. They say basketball. So you go, okay, basketball. So what you do in your mind is you visualize you want to make the visualization as extreme as possible so it's burned in your memory. You associate 1 with gun, so you imagine, let's say, someone shooting a basketball and it exploding. And you want to make it like as dramatic as possible. And let's say, like 2, they say, okay, clown. Well, 2 was shoe, right? You memorized shoe. Well, then you remember like a clown in just ridiculously huge shoes, like falling over and tripping and breaking their leg or something, like as dramatic as possible. So basically what happens then is you do this until 30, and then later when you tell them to name a number, like 5 was hive. That would be bees. I would imagine bees stinging whatever it was that they named or something. So, if they named 1, you'd remember gun, and then that would immediately trigger in your mind that image of shooting the basketball. So basically, mnemonics doesn't necessarily, it's something that anyone can learn to do. You don't have to have a super good memory to be able to do it. It's sort of a mental trick where you make these mental associations where one leads to another. You have this list that you already memorized, and then you make this like crazy image in your head that's going to be triggered when you hear the word again. And that's sort of what mnemonics are. And just to give an example of how they're used, and you don't have to be a mental genius to be, and this kind of trick is done all the time. A lot of the times you'll watch TV shows and it'll be like, oh, we're going to interview this person with an amazing memory, and he's going to shake every single person's hand and he's going to remember all their names. Some of these people really do have a good memory, but others, it's just a trick. They're using a mnemonic and they're like pretending they have this amazing memory where, or they'll take cards, like a deck of cards, and shuffle all the cards and be like, I'll remember they put all the cards down and remember the exact order the deck is in or something. All this relies on mnemonics or other kinds of trickery. So anyway, I digress. Just go impress your friends. Memorize a list of 30 things, and be the life of the party. Memorize lists. So Price was frustrated. So anyway, but this is really interesting. So it says, we propose the name hyperthymestic syndrome from the Greek word thymesis, meaning remembering, and that AJ is the first reported case. See, this is really strange to me because you have one that's saying that she's 1 in 12, and then another that says she's 1 in 60, and this one says that she's the first reported case. And this was in 2000. When was this? 2006? 2006, when it said 1 in 12, that was 2012. So I suppose that either they found different people, more people, or there's different types, because this says, and the first one says hyperthymesia, and this one says hyperthymistic. So I don't know if perhaps they're different or not, but you can see from what I'm seeing, it seems like they are very different, whereas Price has this constant stream that's debilitating, and Mary Lou Henner seems to be filtered in some capacity where she can have some control over it. So Price was frustrated by the resulting publicity and did not cooperate with, that's probably why he referred to her as AJ. Price was frustrated by the resulting publicity and did not cooperate much with further research. Interesting. That's why. Interesting. But one outcome was that McGaw's office began to receive reports of more such cases. All right, so probably that's why the number went up, because once it was reported, more people came forward. Meanwhile, Price wrote with Bart Davis a book about her experiences called The Woman Who Can't Forget. Interesting. So violinist Louise Owen was among those profiled by 60 Minutes as well. For me, I will often see a calendar in my head, and it's usually a month at a time. When I hear the date, it's like my brain immediately goes to a position on a calendar, and once I locate it, I see what happened instantly. When 60 Minutes host Leslie Stahl tested Owen, she could remember within minutes important events that had happened on a particular date, like the January 28, 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. Total recall is not without limits. It typically kicks in for events that happen after the age of 11 or 12, so it is not a window into early consciousness. It's interesting. So, interesting. Yeah, it happens at a certain age. It shows best for long-term memories, even for especially high scorers. Total recall may not be outstanding in short-term memories. So it's even not a totally unfiltered experience. It's good for long-term, but not short-term. So even this, and the things that people are struggling with, it's not a completely unfiltered remembering. It's still filtered to some degree. Significantly, Jill Price, intensively studied, only remembered details for the times and dates of events that mattered to her personally. She was no better than average at general current events. So even with this, you can see that the brain, the brain as operating as a conditioning system for the mind, will prioritize that which is important. Why? Well, because that would be important for survival. If you're surviving, you want to remember things that are, critical things rather than inconsequential things. If you remember, oh shit, when I see a tiger, that's dangerous. That's quite a lot more important than, what you foraged 27 days ago at 2 p.m. So for most of the very high recall people who contacted McGaw and his colleagues, including Bob Petrella, the skill was not automatic either. They practiced it. Interesting. Describing mental systems that would seemingly improve retrieval, sorting memories chronologically or categorically. See, very interesting. So it definitely seems like there's a big scale. It seems like someone like Price, it's just totally debilitating. Not totally, but significantly debilitating with just a constant stream coming in. And other people seem like not so much, and they're even practicing it to improve it. So this date-based structure seemed to help them organize their memories as though they were tagging them for easy reference. Interesting. But these memory aids, mnemonics, can't be the explanation for their abilities. McGaw's lab tested many subjects who had excellent memories. Not just not in the highly superior autobiographic memory league. Could study of total recall help with the fight against memory loss in Alzheimer and other diseases that sap memory? That's hard to say because in truth, science doesn't presently know very much about this condition. Perhaps it belongs in part to the intersection between mind and the brain that we call the hard problem of consciousness. We must hope that, if true, the fact does not deter continued research. And it's interesting that, of course, they mentioned the hard problem of consciousness, which is the total, rock on which scientific materialism shatters, meaning that if you believe that the brain and the mind are the same thing, or that the mind generates the brain, there is absolutely no way that you can explain subjective experience. That's the hard problem of consciousness. Not very many people know this. And it's really unfortunate that that's the case because it obliterates science. Science is an outdated paradigm. Scientific materialism, specifically, the belief that matter and only matter exists where matter is defined as a mind-independent substance, is completely fallacious, illogical, and ridiculous and cannot explain the only thing that you are, or any of us are familiar with, which is your own subjectivity. Now, have you ever thought about that before? The only thing that you or anyone, the only thing that you or anyone is familiar with is your subjectivity. You've never experienced something outside of it's all filtered through the lens of your subjectivity. So, what that means is that basically scientific materialism can't explain the only thing that we ever experience, the only thing that we ever have there is nothing else other than that. And yet scientific materialism can't explain it. And that's very important to realize because it shatters scientific materialism as being a outdated model that is should have been gotten rid of years and years and years and years ago. It should have gotten rid of in the 1920s where quantum mechanics was really starting to come into play. And it was realized that, with like de Broglie's matter waves, realizing that matter behaved like waveforms, and with Max Planck, the founder of quantum mechanics, saying that as, a person who has studied matter, there is no such thing as matter, and that ultimately mind is what is the ultimate reality. Anyway, it should have been jettisoned a long time ago. But when it comes to our discussion today, with regard to past lives, what would happen if you remembered all your past lives? Well, what would happen is that you would go absolutely insane, and it's a very good thing that you don't remember your past lives, or you would be completely inoperable. You wouldn't be able to move. You wouldn't be able to function. You could you would be insane. And of course, this has been filtered out by the brain, because insane beings that can't do anything are going to be eaten by predators. So of course, that's going to be a natural selection coupled with dialectical evolution. Of course, that's not going to be selected for. It would be the most useless, function with regard to survival, because you'd be incapacitated. And so we have evolved such that this gets filtered out. But now, going forward, as humanity becomes hyper-aware, we can start to augment ourselves, develop technologies, develop augmentations, develop new technologies and avatars, even perhaps virtual avatars, where we can start to select for that information specifically, rather than having it flood in. We can now that we've gotten here, we've these vehicles of survival, they have served their purpose. They resulted in an avatar that was able to survive and develop self-awareness. Their purpose has been performed. Their purpose has been filled. That was their purpose. Done. We have survived. We reached self-awareness. Now, it's up to humanity to reach hyper-awareness and no longer concern themselves with survival, but growth. And that means, even among many different things, in addition to, creating a planetary civilization and, uniting under one world so that we aren't constantly in violent war and immersed in death. But that's, we'll talk about that another time. But one aspect of this is leaving behind that survival mindset and transforming ourselves so that we can be focused on a growth and transformative mindset. That's why this world is so shit right now, because we should be past the survival stage, but humanity is still stuck in that phase. They're outdated. They haven't gotten with the times. They haven't realized the reason why this world is so shit is because everyone's in a survival mindset. That's the mindset of the jungle. That's the mindset of dog eat dog. That's the mindset of predator prey. We live in a system of predator prey. Capitalism is a system of predator prey. We need to move out of that survival mindset. We live in a shit world because everyone's in a survival mindset. We need to turn into a growth and transformation mindset. Won't that be nice? Instead of having to worry about surviving and not dying, where we can focus on how much better we can make life. Right now we're focused on, holy shit, can we just please hold on to the few rights that we do have? When we can instead focus on, instead of every day trying to figure out what injustice do we have to fight against next? Whose life do we have to save because someone is trying to kill, what country has gone at war with it? Instead of waking up to that every day, we can wake up to, oh wow, what can we do to have a better life for me and you? Like what interesting thing can I create? What new technology can be developed? What new piece of art? What new conscious experience can I have? What new knowledge of the universe can I uncover? What new meaningful, purposeful event can I attend? Like that's the phase that we should be in, and we can be in once humanity wakes up. That's what Hyperianism is all about: giving humanity the tools to reach hyper awareness, because the next phase of existence requires a new consciousness. Doesn't matter what laws we put in or whatever. That needs to happen, of course. But in addition to that, for humanity to truly move into a new phase, we need to reach that higher consciousness, hyper awareness. At least those who are the leaders, right? The leaders need to reach that hyper awareness so that a world can be built around that, and then give humanity the tools so that eventually everyone can reach that. But that's what we need. And until humanity steps away from basic self-awareness and survival It's going to be that shitty state, that state of just constant bloodshed and fighting to survive. Now we need to step into hyper awareness, which is about thriving and transformation. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I have a lot more videos. If you're interested in reincarnation, I have a whole bunch of videos. I might have a playlist. I'm not sure. Check out my channel. There's a lot of videos on reincarnation on my channel. Like I said, in Hyperianism, we prefer localization and relocalization. I want to give a big shout out to everyone that supports on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. The link will pop up right over here. You'll get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, the Citadel, and we're having a secret live stream right after this. And if you ever felt like you've enjoyed something or gotten something from my work or my videos, felt like you've learned something, consider supporting. It helps out a lot. It's how I'm able to do this. So seriously, I appreciate it. Shout out to Renaissance Sari, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, High Expectations Counseling, Jordy, Svetlin, Nicole, and Top of the World, and everyone else. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.